Hey guys, what's up? In this video, we're going to be looking at SQL alchemy. So we're going to be looking at how we can form a one-to-many relationship between two models in SQL alchemy. Now, if you're wondering what a one-to-many relationship is, it's one that involves one object mapping onto many instances of a particular class. So for example, let's say we have a user class, so let's say we have our user model. This user model can be able to map onto various instances of, let's say, posts. So we can have a user having many posts. They can be able to have a relationship to all the posts they create. Now in this video, I'm going to be creating a simple example using SQL Alchemy, and then we are going to look at how to use the SQL Alchemy one-to-many relationship. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is to check whether I have SQL Alchemy installed. So if you're wondering what I'm using Windows Subsystem for Linux. I'm using VS Code, and I think I have SQL Alchemy installed. So if I do pip install SQL Alchemy, this should actually return requirement already satisfied, or the requirement exists on my system. So since I have SQL Alchemy installed on my system, what I'm going to go ahead and do is to create our database models. So we're going to create a user table as well as a post table, and then we're going to establish a relationship between these two tables. So let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is to specify where our database is going to be. So I'm going to be using SQLite in this video. So the first thing I'm going to do is to import the create engine function, and what this is going to do is going to help us to create our database in a particular folder. So I'm just going to come and say from SQL Alchemy, I'm going to go ahead and import the create engine function. So this is actually going to be our create engine function. And when I create the create engine function, I'm going to go and specify, the next thing I have to do is actually specify where we want our database to be. So we're going to be using SQLite, which is a file-based database, and we want it to be in our current folder. So what I'll do is to come and I'm going to use OS, so I'll say import OS, and I'm going to create a variable, which I'm going to call the base.da variable. It's just simply going to point to our current folder. So I'll just come right here and say that our base.da is going to be equal to os.path, and then we are going to specify that we need the directory name of our current folder. So I'll just say that name, and then I'll give in the real path to where this current file we are editing is. So I'll do that by saying os.path dot, in this case I'll say real path to our file variable, which is the current file we are editing. Now right after doing that, I'm going to create a connection string that's basically going to specify which database we're going to use and where it's going to be located. So I'll just do that by saying con is going to be equal to, we're going to write SQLite, and then I'm going to specify where we want our database to be. So I'll just append our base.da variable and the name of the database. So I'll just do that by saying os dot, so this is actually going to be os.path, and then I'll use the join function. So I'm going to specify the file, the path, so which is the first argument in this case, and that path is going to be our base.da. So the base.da is simply going to have the name of the folder where we are currently at. So I'll say base.da and then specify the name of our variable. So in this case, it's going to be, let's just call it, let's actually just call it blog.db, or you can even use .sqlite3. So right after doing that, I can even specify echo. Actually, this is not the engine function, so I'll just call that engine function within our, so I'll just come right here and say that our engine is going to be a call to our create engine function. So I'll say create engine, and right after doing that, and I'm going to go ahead and provide the first argument as our connection string. So I'm just going to pass in our connection string, and then I also specify echo equals to true, meaning that we want to get all of our, want to actually get all the generated SQL each time we create a database transaction. So I'll just do that by saying echo is going to be equal to true. And right after doing this, then I'm going to go ahead and basically create our tables. So tables in SQL Alchemy are created from our base class. So to create our base class, we're going to need the declarative base function. So when we call it declarative base function, we can be able to form a base class which can help us to create our models. So I'm just going to come right at the top of our code, and in this case, I'm going to come and say from sqlalchemy.ext, then .declarative. I'm going to go ahead and import our declarative base function. So I'll just come and call that function right here. I'll say that our base class, so this is going to be the base class, is going to just be returned as a result of calling our declarative base function. Right after doing that, and we're going to go ahead and model out our tables. So the first thing I'm going to do is to model these tables out using doc string. So I'll just come right here and create a simple doc string, and this is going to have our class. So we're going to have a class of user. So each user is going to have, let's say, an ID. They're going to have an ID which is going to be an integer. They're going to also have a username. So we're going to say a username is going to be a string. Then we're also going to have, let's say, an email, which is also going to be a string. Now also going to have another table which is going to be a post table in our example. So I'll just say this is going to be a class of post, and then we are going to have the various fields for each post. So for example, in this case we're going to have the ID, which is going to be an int. We shall have a title. So this title is also going to be a string. Now we shall also have the content of that particular post. So we're going to have our content, and this content is going to be a string as well. So since these tables are connected to each other or are related, we're going to need a foreign key. So the foreign key is simply going to be the ID of the user who created a particular post. So in this case, what we're going to do is to include this foreign key onto our post table. So to do that, I'll just come right here and I'll add another field which I'm going to call the user ID, and this is going to be an integer. So this is going to actually be our foreign key in this case. So the foreign key is simply the primary key of that instance of the user who created the post. So I'm just going to come right here, and what I'll do is to remove this. I'm correcting it for. So what we have actually, this is going to be our primary key, and this will also be the primary key of our post. Now that we have our data here, we're going to go ahead and create a table based on the fields we have. So I'm just going to come right here, and what I'll do is to say class, and then I'm going to start with user. So I'll make this inherit from base, since we created our base from declarative base. That's going to allow us to create these database tables. Now I'll create the table name first. So to do that, I'll pass in the table name danda variable, which is basically going to specify the name of our table. So I'll say danda name, and then this is going to be equal to our name of the table. So let's just call this users for now. Right after that, I'll specify an ID. So our ID is going to be an integer, so which is also a column. So I'll first import column and integer from sqlalchemy. Now I'm just going to simply do this, and then we shall have, it's going to be integer, and then I'll have, let's say, column. So I'll have column, and then I'm going to go ahead and also specify our string, and then we shall also have our foreign key class. So these are actually classes that are going to specify the types of the fields we're going to create on our table. So I'll just come right here, and the first thing I'm going to do is to say that we are going to have our ID, and this is going to be a column, which is going to be an integer, and then this integer is going to be the primary key. So I'm just going to specify primary key. So it's going to be primary key, which is a boolean, and it's going to be true in this case, meaning that this field is actually going to be our primary key. Now right after doing that, I'll specify our username. So our username is going to be equal to a column, and then this column is going to be a string. So we're actually going to specify how the longest string can be. So let's say the longest string can be 40 characters. Now we're going to pass in nullable equals false, meaning that this should not be null. This is our nullable constraint. So I'll say nullable equals true. Actually, it's going to be false. Let me change this. It's going to be false. And right after doing that, then we're going to specify our email. So our email is going to be a column as well, and this column is also going to be a string. So we shall say string, and then this string is also going to have, let's say, 40 characters. So we can actually also say that's going to be nullable. So we can say nullable equals true. And right after doing this, then we can also create a simple function that's going to allow us to return string representations of these tables, of these objects created from this class. So I'll just say def danda repre. So this will take in self, which is basically that object that we shall be acting on. Then for that object, we just want to return, let's say we want to return the username of that user. So I'll say user, and then here we shall have our username. So I'll say self.username. So right after doing this, then I'm going to go ahead and also create our post table. So the first thing we're going to do is to create a class. So I'll say class, and in this case our class is going to be post, and this is going to also inherit from base. So right after doing this, then we shall specify our table name. So I'll say Danda table name, and this is going to be our post table. So right after doing this, we shall specify our ID. So I'll basically copy this since it's going to be the same. So what we have here is our ID column, which is going to be an integer as well as the primary key in this case. Now after doing this, I'm going to specify that we're going to have our title as well as our content. So I'll just come right here and say that we're going to have our title, and this title is going to be a column, which is going to be a string. So this string is going to be, let's say, 45 characters long, and then it shouldn't be null. So nullable is going to be false. Now after doing this, then I'm going to also go ahead and create our content field. So the content is going to be a column, and then this column is going to be a string. So this string is going to be, let's say, 255 characters long, and then it should also not be null. So I'll say null equals to false. So right after doing this, then I'm going to also copy this repre method so that we have string representation of our post object. So I'll just come right here and add it. So right here, instead of saying self.username, we are going to say that we want to return a title by its post by its title. So the next thing we're going to do is to implement our foreign key, which is our user ID in this case. So what I'm going to do is to come right here. So I'll just come and say that we're going to have a user ID, and this is going to be equal to a column. So this is actually going to be an integer since it's a primary key of another table. So I'll just come and say that this is going to be an integer, and then I'll specify that this is going to be a foreign key. And this foreign key is actually going to be a foreign key to, so this is actually going to be a foreign key, and we specify the column. So while specifying the column, we need to note the name of the table that we are referring to. And in this case, we specify the name to be user. So when I come right here, I'm going to specify that the table is actually going to be our users table. And the column we want to make our foreign key in this case is going to be the ID that specific table. So right after doing this, then we need some way of creating a relationship between these tables so that we can be able to know which posts belong to a certain user. So to do that, I'm going to come and specify a column on the user table. So I'll say posts is going to be equal to a relationship between our user table as well as our post table. So to do that, I'll just come right at the top here, and I'll come and import. So I'll say from sqlalchemy.orm. I'm going to go ahead and import our relationship. So I'll say we're going to have relationship. So from the relationship, we're going to specify the name we shall use while getting the posts from a certain user. So I'll just come right here, and what I'll do is to go to our user table right here. So I'll say that this is going to be a relationship. Then the first thing it's going to take in is going to be the basic. It's actually going to be the table to which we are going to have a relationship. So this is going to be our post table. So I'll just specify it here as a string, and then I'm also going to specify the backref, which is going to allow us to call the different posts created by a certain user, or to call a post and find out who created that post. So to do that, I'll just come and say that we're going to have a backref, and then this backref is going to be our author. So what this means is that we're going to be able to find out which user created a post is by specifying post.user. So after we've created our database, now we're going to go ahead. Actually, we've created our database tables. Now we're going to go ahead and simply create this in our database. So to do that, I'll just come right at the bottom here, and what I'll do is to say just going to use our base class. So I'll just come and say base dot. So in this case, I'm going to say base dot metadata dot create all, and then I'm going to also attach our engine. So I'll pass in our engine right here. So this is basically to show that you want to create a database within the directory in which you are in. So right after doing this, hoping you don't have mistakes, so I'm just going to go ahead and run our code. So to do that, I'll just come right here in our terminal. So I have it already satisfied. So what I'll do is to come and say Python main, actually it's going to be Python3 main.py. So this will go ahead and create our database as we've specified right here in our tables. So just like you see here, since we specified SQLAlchemy echo to be true, we now see that our tables are being created and the SQL generated is right here. So we have all our fields created, just like you can see here. And what's interesting is we also have our foreign key specified, and this foreign key references the ID of our users table. Now that our database tables have been created, we're going to go ahead and create our database objects. We're going to also look at how to establish a one-to-many relationship between a user as well as the posts. So let's get started. So what I'm going to do is to go right here, and the first thing I'll need is a session. So a session is going to help us to create, read, update, and delete database objects. It's also going to help us to flash any changes that we may have onto our database. So I'm going to first start by importing the session maker class from sqlalchemy.orm. So I'll say session maker, and right after importing our session maker class, then I'm just going to come right here and say that our session is going to be an instance of our session maker. Now since we have an object of session, we'll have to bind it to our engine so that it knows that our database we're going to use in this case is going to be blog.db. So I'll just come right here and say bind is going to be equal to engine. And once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and save. So when I save this, I'll then go ahead and use it to create our database object. So I'll just come right here. I'm going to create a new file which I'm going to call populate.py. That's going to help us to populate our database with some objects. So I'm going to first start by importing our classes. So I'll say from main, I'm going to import our post as well as our user. So right after doing this, I'm also going to import our session. So it's going to be our session object. It's going to help us to basically create things in our database. So what I've done is, what I'm actually going to do in this case is to create a new user. So we shall start with a new user, and this user is going to be an object of type user. So this user will have a username as well as an email, just like we see here. So we're going to have username being equal to, so I'll call this test user. And right after doing this, then I'm going to go ahead and also give in the email. So the email in this case is actually going to be test. So we shall have test user at gmail.com. And right after doing this, then I'll come and use our session to add this user to our database. So to do this, I'll say session.add, and in this case, we shall have our new user. Actually, it's going to be our new user. So we're going to say session.commit to finally have these changes reflected on our database. So I'll say session.commit. So after doing this, then I'm going to go ahead and query for this user. Actually, I'll first attach them to a post or create posts of that specific user. So to do that, I'm going to come and first save. I run this to create a new user. So I'll say Python3, and then I'll say populate.py. And then this will go ahead and create a new user based on the object we've created. So when I come back, I'm going to go ahead and also create posts. So in this case, I'm going to create many posts, but shall attach each of those posts onto this user. So what I'll do is to comment this out. Actually, I'm going to comment this out. And once I comment this out, then what I'll do is to first create our post. So I'm just going to come right here. I'll create a list. I'm just going to use a list, and this list is going to have various posts. So let's say the post is going to be having a title, and then the title, let's say learn Django for the first title. Now after doing this, then now we'll also have the content of that specific post. Then let's say we're just going to have some lorem ipsum text here to just keep it simple. So I'm just going to come and copy paste this so that we have multiple dictionaries. Actually, I'll copy and paste. So right after having this, I'll go ahead and change the title. So I'm just going to change the remaining titles here. So let's say for the first one, we're going to have learn Java. So I'll say it's going to be learn JavaScript. So let's say learn HTML. So let's say these are just posts for programming, and let's say this is going to be learn CSS. So what we have is a list containing posts. So we're going to add all these posts onto our database. So I'll just come right here. I'll use a simple loop. I'll say for post in our posts list. I'm going to create a new post object. So I'll say new post, and then this is going to be an object of type post. So in here we shall have a title. So since these are dictionaries, we'll have to access the title using the key. So in this case, I'll say post and then title. And then right after doing this, I'll say that we're going to have our content, and this content is going to be post, and then we shall have content right here. So right after doing it, I'm going to use our session to add this onto our database. So I'll say session dot add, and then I'll say new post, and then say session dot commit to finally save it to our database. The problem we have here is we haven't yet attached any post onto a user. So let's say we have our user in the database. So I'm just going to go ahead and query for that user. So I'll say user is going to be equal to user. Let's say this is actually going to be using our session. So I'll use the session by saying session.query, and then I'll specify that we need our user in this case. So this user is going to have specific fields. So let's say we're going to filter all of our users, and we shall find a user with an ID of 1, since we have only one user. So in this case, what I'm going to do is to say we're going to have the user, if user dot, in this case we shall say ID, and if this ID is equal to 1, then we shall have to get to return the first object. So right after doing this, then what I'm going to do is to say that the author of each of these posts is going to be the user we created. So to do that, I'll just come and say, since we have this relationship established via the backref, which is our author backref, I'll just come right here and say author is going to be equal to our user. So when I save this, I'm going to go ahead and run this file. So when I run this file, what I can actually do is to write a simple print statement right here. So I'll print an f string, and what I'll do is to say post created. So I'll say post created, and in this case, let's say I'll print the post and its title. So let's say post, and then since it's a dictionary, I'll access the title. So when I save this, I'm going to go ahead and run this script. So I'm just going to come to our terminal right here. I'll run python 3 populate.py. So right now we see post created, learn CSS, post created. So we see most of the posts are created actually. So we see that our SQL has run successfully and all our posts have been created. And these posts are all connected to the user we created. Now the beauty here is we can be able to use our backref to basically use a one-to-many relationship, which is actually going to be a reverse, which will be a many-to-one relationship. So let's see this in action. So I'm going to comment this, and once I comment this, now the first thing I'm going to do is to search for a user. So what I'll do is to, actually we have a user already searched for here. What I'll need is to return a list of posts created by that user. So to do that, I'll just say print user.posts. And why am I doing this? I'm doing this because right here our relationship states that on our post we shall be able to call user.post. So we shall have a .post relationship. So when I come right here, I'll just say user.post, and that will return the list of posts created by this user. So when you go back here and I run, we're actually going to see a list of posts created by that specific user. So when I come right here, I can also access a post and then access the post by the post author. So let's try to actually access a post. So what I'll do is to actually come, I'm just going to commit this for now. Now let's query for our user. So I'll actually query for our post. So I'll say post is going to be equal to our session. So we're going to use our session to query. So I'll say session dot query, and then in here I'm going to say that we're going to use our post class. Then we shall query, actually we shall filter by the ID. So let's actually say post dot ID, and if the ID is equal to 1, then we want to return the first object. So after doing this, then the way we can access the user from the post is by saying post.author. So I'll just come here and say print post.author. So this is going to actually return our post author. So when I come right here, I'm just simply going to say python 3 populate.py, and this is going to return our test user. So if we want to query for a user's post, we can use user.post, and now we can actually return the author via the post author. So this actually represents the one-to-many relationship, while this represents the many-to-one relationship, or the reverse. So let's go ahead and also look at another case. So right here I have backref. Actually we specified our relationship via backref. So this actually shows us that we have to create this relationship once. Now I'm going to talk about backpopulates, which helps us to create this relationship, but in this case we'll have to establish relationships in both of the tables. So let's look at backpopulates and how it works. So now we've been able to use our backref, and this has helped us to see how we can create this relationship and how we can be able to actually access the posts a user created as well as the author of a certain post. Now let's look at backref. So if I wanted to create the same relationship using backref, what I would actually do is to say posts, and then I would specify backpopulates instead of backref. So I'll say backpopulates, and in this case I'll say author. So I'll do the same thing here. So what happens actually is when I specify the user, I can specify the relationship posts, and then I say backref is equal to author, but I don't have to stop there. I have to do the same thing on the post side. So I'll just come and say, in case you wanted to actually access the user on the post, so I'll do something like author, and then I say that in this case we're going to have our relationship. So I'll specify the model, which is going to be our user model in this case. So when you have this, then you have to also specify our backpopulates, and this backpopulates is also going to be the field of our, let me actually remove this. So this is actually going to be the field of our post. So in this case I'll have to say that we want to access our post. So the tricky thing here is having this reverse relationship. So if we do post, we have to specify our backpopulates as author, and if we do author, we have to specify our backpopulates as post. So if we went ahead and ran our populates.py, so when I save this and go back to our terminal right here, right now we see the same relationship, but in this case we are using backpopulates. So backpopulates is used on both tables, while backref is actually used on one database table. So let's go ahead and look at how we can configure delete functionality on our models with a one-to-many relationship. So if you've heard of something called cascade, this is actually common in, like, let's say the Django ORM. Now SQLAlchemy also allows us to carry out that operation. So let's say we wanted to delete the user, but we also wanted to delete all the posts that user has. Then we have to specify, we have to go ahead and specify cascade on our relationship. So let's go ahead and look at that. Alright, so right now we are going to implement our delete functionality for our one-to-many relationship. So what I'm going to do is to simply add a cascade attribute on that specific relationship that we want to delete. For example, when you go back to our database tables right here, on our user table, we have our relationship. So we also have a relationship on our author that we created using backpopulates. Now, if you want to delete our user and make sure that all our posts are deleted, we're going to simply add the attribute cascade. And right now we see cascade is equal to, so right now we can go ahead and say that cascade is going to be equal to, so I'll just specify all, meaning that we're going to delete all related objects, and then we shall say delete, meaning that we're going to actually delete all of the related objects. So when I come here and save, I'm going to just come right in here, and what I'll do is to create a new file which I'm going to call delete.py. Now the first thing I'm going to do is to import our session just like we did in our populate. I'll actually just copy these and place them right in here. So I'll first query for the user I want to delete, so I'll just say user to delete, and in this case I'll say that this user is equal to user, and in this case it's actually not going to be a user object, it will actually be from our session, so we shall use our session to query for that user. So I'll say session.query, and right in here I'll say that we want specifically a user with an ID of 1 because you have only one user in our table. However, you can go ahead and create others. So you can say user.id. If the ID is equal to 1, then you want the first object with that specific ID. So once you have this user, then what you want to do is to basically go ahead and delete this user. So actually, let's also search for all posts that exist in our database. So to do that, I'll just say posts is going to be equal to, in this case, we have a session. So we're going to use our session to query for that. We actually have a mistake here. This is supposed to be we're querying for our user model, and then we specify that we're filtering by ID. So I'll say user.id is equal to 1. So now that we have this, then we're going to go ahead and search for all users. So I'll say query, and then here I'll specify that we're going to have posts, and then we can actually say that we want all of the objects. So right now, since we have all the posts related to this user, when we delete this user, we are going to actually delete all posts in our database. So let's go ahead and do this. So we shall use our session. So I'll say session.delete. And in this case, we're going to delete our user to delete. Then after doing this, I'll come and say that we're going to also print our posts to find out whether a post actually exists. I'm actually also going to search for all posts. So I'll say all posts is going to be equal to session.query, and then I'll pass in the user model. Actually, this is actually going to be all users. So I'm just going to say this is going to be all users, and this is going to be .all, and then right here I can say that we're going to have all posts and all users. So instead of printing posts, I'll print all posts, and then I'll print all users. Actually, this is going to be print all users. So I'll come right in here and print all users. So when I save this, what's going to happen is when we delete this user, all the posts are going to be deleted. Let's actually try it before we delete the user. So I'll actually first comment out this. We even have an extra command we're going to add on to this. So when I try to save and run this, so I'll come back to our terminal right here, and when I run Python 3, so this is actually going to be delete.py. We now have the user, so we have users test user, and we have a user of ID 1, which is one we want. We also have our database that has our table, I mean, that has all our posts. So let's try to actually delete the user with ID of 1. So when I come right here, I can come and say that we're going to delete the user. So instead of just printing out this, I'll just come and delete. So I'll also say session.commit. And once I save this, then we hope that this is going to delete all the posts related to this user. So when I come right here, if I run this, we actually now have, let me see, we are printing all users, and let's see for the posts. Let me actually remove this echo statement right here. So let me actually just print all this after deleting. So actually we see that, let's actually see where this is coming from in delete. It's actually like all our objects have been deleted. So let's actually try to find this out. So let's say if we remove this statement and we try to print all these users. So I'll just try to comment this out. And when I comment this query, I'm going to go ahead and print all our objects. I'll actually go ahead and also specify that we don't want to echo out this SQL statement. So just to clean this up, I'm just going to run this once again. And right now we see that the user has been deleted, as well as the post connected to that user. In this video, we've been able to learn how to create one-to-many relationships with SQLAlchemy. Thank you for watching this video, and if you found it helpful, please consider liking, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.